Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
They say the first mistake people make is underestimating the quiet ones. I don't raise my voice. I don't slam doors. I don't fight in public or post my emotions for strangers to validate. But that doesn't mean I don't see everything. And I saw her. From the very beginning. I'm Jared Langston, 35. Own a woodwork and renovation business I built from nothing, unless you count blood, sweat, and a garage so cold in winter I could see my breath while sanding down pine boards. I've got calluses that don't soften, a back that pops when I stand too fast, and a stubborn streak that kept me pushing even when clients paid late and the power company flirted with shutting me off. That business? That house I live in? All me. Then Eliza happened. Or more accurately, she bounced into my life like a champagne cork at a trivia night. I was just another quiet guy tucked into the back booth with a beer and a mind full of facts about baseball stats and 80s movie soundtracks. She stormed our table with a laugh that made people turn and a presence that didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask to join our team, just slid in beside me, flashed a smile, and answered a question about Roman emperors like she was born to win. That night, she kissed me. Just like that. No build-up. No hesitation. We talked for maybe 45 minutes, but she said, "You're real," then leaned in and kissed me like I was the last man she'd ever have the chance to touch. I was hooked before I even made it home. 2 years in, she moved into my place. Not an apartment we found together. Not a starter condo with modern fixtures and granite countertops. My house. The one I poured myself into after work. The one I'd remodeled room by room. Slow, imperfect, but with my bare hands. She called it rustic. Said it had potential. Started replacing things right away. Throw pillows with weird quotes stitched into them. Baskets of seashells even though we lived nowhere near the ocean. Candles with names like Forest Rain and Whiskey Leather. I let her. Not because I was whipped or scared, but because I thought that's what people did when they loved each other. They made room. They compromised. We agreed she'd contribute monthly. Not rent. I didn't need her to pay to stay like some landlord. I just believed in fairness. In partnership. She was good with it. Never once asked about putting her name on the deed, and I never offered. That wasn't a trust issue. That was just how I was raised. Don't complicate what works. She worked in corporate communications at some biotech firm. I never really understood the job, lots of buzzwords, lots of time on her phone, lots of evening mixers and team alignment, retreats. She looked good in a suit, I'll give her that. Always polished. Always knew what to say. Meanwhile, I come home with sawdust in my hair and dirt under my nails, feeling more satisfied than half her colleagues probably ever would. We weren't the same. I knew that early on. I liked slow mornings, coffee in a real mug, not some paper cup from a drive-thru. I liked building things I could touch. I liked that feeling at the end of the day when your body hurt just enough to remind you you'd earned your sleep. She thrived on momentum. On rooftop parties in glass-walled offices and shiny shoes that clicked when she walked. But for a while, we made it work. I'd bring her takeout when she worked late. She'd wake up early on weekends to meet me at job sites with fresh coffee. She even came to a few of my client meetings, looked out of place, sure, but tried. Still, something shifted. I couldn't tell you the exact day. It was like the air changed in the house. Like the lights flickered a half-second longer before turning on. She started keeping her phone face down. Stopped asking about my projects. Started saying things like, "You wouldn't get it," when I asked about work drama. I chalked it up to stress. Deadlines. Long hours. That's what she told me. But something in me, maybe it was instinct, maybe it was experience, started cataloging the details. Her changing passwords. The extra gym visits. The way she smiled at her phone in the kitchen but didn't notice when I came in. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because when you're building something, a house, a business, a life, you don't start tearing into the walls at the first creak. You listen. You wait. You pay attention. Because the best setups are the ones that look like surrender. And I was already setting mine up. She moved in on a Sunday. Not that it matters to most people, but I remember because it was the only day I wasn't elbow deep in cabinet installations for a high-maintenance client in the suburbs. Eliza arrived with 3 rolling suitcases, 2 duffel bags, and a tote labeled spa stuff. That one got a laugh out of me. I stood at the door with a rag tucked in my back pocket and a fresh layer of polyurethane drying on my forearms, watching her as she directed the movers like a conductor leading a symphony. She wasn't shy about reshaping the house. Within a week, the old leather couch I'd hauled in by myself 3 years ago was covered in a patterned throw. Our towels were replaced with matching color-coded ones, gray for her, navy for me. And suddenly, there were plants. Everywhere. She named them. Fernie, Gladys, Basil the Third. I used to joke that I lived in a lumber-scented fortress. Now it smelled like lavender, eucalyptus, and a dozen candles with names like Midnight Rain and Himalayan Focus. I didn't fight her on it. Truth is, the house looked better with her touches. Livelier. Like someone cared what mood the room gave off. She added things I didn't know I needed. Slippers by the door in winter. Coasters I actually used. A charging station for our phones. She made space feel intentional. We talked early on about the finances. I brought it up, not because I didn't trust her, but because I know what happens when things get messy. I've seen it too many times in renovation jobs, when a couple's name is half on the paperwork and someone gets burned. So I laid it out. It's not rent, I said, sliding a mug of coffee toward her one morning. I'm not your landlord. But this house? It's mine. Paid for it over 10 years. Gutted it. Piece by piece. All I ask is you contribute. Monthly. Nothing formal. Just fairness. She didn't flinch. Just nodded, said, "That's more than fair, babe," and went back to her tablet. I appreciated that. She never asked to be on the deed. Never made it weird. That meant something to me. Eliza worked long hours. Always had her phone out, fingers dancing across the screen like she was defusing a bomb. She'd come home talking about quarterly projections and PR crises, how someone at the firm posted an unapproved meme on the company account and caused a spiral. I didn't always get the jargon, but I listened. She was passionate, sharp, and completely different from the quiet I was used to. She liked to decompress with wine and loud music. I liked whiskey and silence, but I figured that's how balance worked. She'd drag me to cocktail mixers where I'd nurse the same drink for hours while she schmoozed and sparkled. I felt like a flannel-wrapped statue in a room full of glass sculptures. But when she looked back at me and smiled, like I was her anchor, I stayed. I kept our rhythm steady. Mornings started with coffee and her curling up on the stool at the kitchen island, legs tucked beneath her as she read emails. I'd pack my tools, rinse out my mug, and kiss the crown of her head before heading out. She always smelled like rose water and ambition. There were differences, sure. I liked grocery shopping on Saturdays. She preferred delivery apps. I wanted meat and potatoes. She ordered grain bowls and tofu. I'd get excited about a new sander. She'd light up about a boardroom win. But we never fought about it. We had our lanes. Still, there were cracks, tiny ones. She didn't love that I wore boots to nice restaurants. I didn't love that she spent more time documenting brunch than eating it. She wanted a dog. I was hesitant, job sites and responsibility. She rolled her eyes every time I brought up adding a shed in the backyard. More tools, she teased. You planning a hardware invasion? It was playful. At least, I thought it was. Then came the change. It was subtle. Her laughter became more reserved at home, more performative at work events. Her phone, once casually left on the charger, was now face down, always. She stopped bringing home wine. Stopped asking about my projects. I asked once if she was okay. She smiled without teeth and said, "Just work stuff." You know. I didn't. But I didn't push. I thought love meant letting people breathe. At night, I'd lay in bed and listen to her fingers tapping out texts. Quick, confident, quiet. She used to lean against me while watching TV. Now she sat on the far end of the couch, knees pulled up, screen glowing against her face. I told myself it was a phase. Deadlines. Stress. The cycle of being an adult. She still kissed me goodbye. Still said, "Love you." But it started sounding like a recording. And yet, I held on. Because I'm not the kind of man who throws away good things over shadows. I measure twice before I cut. I always wait for proof. But even then, even with every gut feeling kicking, I didn't see what was coming. Not yet. But I would. Fridays were usually sacred to me. Clean up the tools, finish paperwork, maybe grab takeout and pass out watching reruns. But this Friday, I was parked in a lot 3 blocks from a downtown hotel I had no interest in entering, dressed in jeans I rarely wore and a collared shirt that still had the tags on it until 20 minutes ago. Eliza had mentioned the mixer 3 times that week. Just a little thing, she said. Company morale stuff. I'd heard that tone before, the casual brush-off, the downplay. I told her I'd stay home, finish inventory sheets. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "That's perfect, babe. Less stress for you." But by 9 p.m., I got a text. Babe, had a few too many. Can you grab me? I didn't hesitate. That's what partners do. You show up. Even when you're not invited. Even when you're more comfortable sanding cedar than walking through glass-etched lobbies. I shut down my spreadsheets, washed the sawdust off my forearms, grabbed my keys, and drove out. The valet gave me a half glance before nodding toward the lot. The hotel lobby was marble-heavy, full of echo and perfume. I didn't see Eliza, but I didn't panic. I found a seat by the tall glass wall near the entrance and texted her. I'm in the lobby. 2 minutes later, her reply buzzed. 15 more minutes, last round. Fair enough. I figured she was saying goodbye to her boss or grabbing her purse. I leaned back, scrolling through tool catalogs on my phone. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I stood to stretch. That's when I heard it, her laugh. Not from the elevator or the hall. Above me. There was a mezzanine bar that overlooked the lobby. Curved railing, soft lighting, the hum of conversation. I looked up. She was there, leaning against the railing. One heel popped off the floor, her fingers toying with a straw in her glass. She looked good, red blazer, confident posture, smile wide enough to feel curated. She was surrounded by 3 people. Jordan, I recognized from her Instagram, a guy with perfect hair and too many teeth. Mira, her work twin, who always side-eyed me at events like I'd tracked mud onto her designer rug. And a third guy, older, in a navy suit. They were mid-conversation. I almost turned back to my seat. But then I heard her voice again, clear, sharp. He's probably already downstairs waiting like a puppy. They all laughed. Loud. Jordan tilted his glass, said something I couldn't catch. Eliza leaned in, lips glossy, and grinned. He's so obsessed with me. I could cheat in front of him, and he'd still blame himself. I froze. Every part of me did. I didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Just listened. Mira made a mock gasp. You're evil. No, Eliza said, voice light and unbothered. I'm just honest. Another wave of laughter. Glasses clinked. I sat back down slowly, heart hammering in a quiet, controlled rhythm. My eyes never left the mezzanine. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to scream or charge upstairs. I didn't want to be that guy. I just needed to see it. I needed to let the truth settle in the way would glue seeps into joints, silent, final, irreversible. And in that moment, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Too calm. Because now I knew. All the questions I'd tucked away, all the strange little shifts in her, the lies layered in charm, this was the answer. Right there, above my head, laughing about my loyalty like it was a flaw. Like I was a fool for showing up. And that's when the plan began forming. Not vengeance. Not revenge. Just clarity. My kind of clarity. The slow, deliberate kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that builds quietly until the structure's too strong to collapse. I stood up, walked out of the lobby, and drove home. No calls. No texts. No confrontation. She didn't know I'd heard anything. She probably assumed I was still waiting like that puppy she mocked. That was fine. Let her think that. Let her sip her cocktail and keep smiling. I got home, unlocked the front door, and stood in the entryway for a long while. The house was still. A candle she left burning on the console table flickered lavender-scented lies at me. I walked into the kitchen, poured a drink, not because I needed one, but because it gave my hands something to do while my mind drafted the next 30 days. Not 31. Exactly 30. I talked to Riley in the morning, my buddy who does real estate law. Get the paperwork right. I wasn't about to get sloppy now. I would do this by the book. Let her play the role of the glittering social star. Let her drink in applause from strangers. I'd be the man who walked away with dignity, with the house, with the silence. She thought I wouldn't leave if she cheated in front of me. She was about to find out I already had. She came home sometime after 1 a.m. I was already up, sitting at the kitchen table in a hoodie, staring at a half-cold cup of coffee. The house was still, except for the low hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the front door as it opened. Her heels tapped against the hardwood in an uneven rhythm. She didn't expect me to be awake. I could hear it in the way she paused just inside the door. Jared, she called out, hesitant. I didn't answer. I waited. A few seconds later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, mascara smudged beneath one eye, blazer draped over one shoulder, hair tousled in that way she usually perfected before selfies. She looked tired, a little disoriented, maybe still buzzed. I didn't see your text. My phone died. Why'd you leave? I didn't say anything. I slid the manila envelope across the table. She stared at it like it was a scorpion. When she finally picked it up and saw the top page, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Wait, what is this? 30-day notice, I said evenly. You need to move out. Her face scrunched. What are you talking about? I heard everything, Eliza. From the lobby. You were above me on the mezzanine. My voice was calm. Too calm. I heard every word. She dropped the envelope onto the table and scoffed. Are you serious right now? Jared, I was drunk. It was a stupid joke. I shook my head once, slow and final. It wasn't a joke to you in the moment, and it sure as hell wasn't funny. Her jaw clenched. You're really doing this? Over a dumb comment? Over a pattern, I said. Over disrespect that's been building for months. That comment was just the moment I stopped pretending. Her voice rose. You didn't even talk to me about it. You just left me there. Right? I said, standing up, pushing my chair back quietly. Because staying would have given you exactly what you wanted. A scene. A chance to spin the narrative. I'm not giving you that. She blinked. Unbelievable. I stepped around her and walked into the hallway. I'd already packed up most of my documents, changed the passwords on all my accounts, and locked up anything valuable in the storage chest I installed in the garage. I was methodical. Strategic. Just like when I framed out a house. Measure twice, cut once. She followed me. You're throwing everything away over this? No, I said without turning around. You did that. I'm just handing you the paperwork. That night, I moved into the guest room. The one we never used, the one she always said was too dark and needed better lighting. I didn't care. I changed the lock on the door and installed a keypad. Quietly. No yelling. No drama. Just boundaries. The next morning, she tried the soft approach. Brought coffee. Knocked on the guest room door. Left a note. Can we talk? I shredded the note and drank my own coffee. Then came the tears. The pacing. The guilt. It didn't mean anything, Jared. It was just banter. You know how people get when they're trying to fit in. You didn't have to fit in, I said through the door. You just had to be decent. She stopped trying for 2 days. Then came the seduction. Lingerie. Accidental door openings. Perfume in the air like some kind of old tactic from a playbook she never told me she had. I ignored all of it. By the 4th day, the anger came. She banged on the door, cursed me out, accused me of being heartless, emotionally unavailable, said I was punishing her for something everyone does. People make mistakes, she screamed. You don't throw away a relationship over a few stupid words. But we both knew it wasn't just the words. It was what they revealed. The cracks that had always been there. The shift from partnership to performance. I'd been carrying the weight of making us work, and now that I'd stopped, the imbalance was impossible to ignore. After that, things got quiet. We coexisted like roommates with a silent treaty. She cooked meals as if that could undo what had been said. I didn't touch a single plate. Ate sandwiches in the garage or picked up takeout. I stayed out longer on job sites. Worked later. Fixed things that didn't need fixing just to avoid being inside that house with her energy pressing against the walls. One night, she came to the guest room door and said, softly, I'll move out soon. Dahlia said I could stay with her for a bit. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. 10 days later, she packed her suitcase. I watched her walk to the car, carrying a leather bag and a duffel that used to sit at the foot of our bed. I helped her load it, like I would for a client. No warmth. No tension. Just courtesy. Before she closed the car door, she turned to me one last time. You know I didn't mean it, right? I was drunk. Trying to fit in. I nodded once. I believed you when you weren't trying. She didn't say anything after that. Just stared, like she wanted to memorize the version of me that didn't break. Then she got in the car and drove away. By the time I got back inside, there were 17 missed calls on my phone. The next day, 19 more. By the end of the week, 62 in total. I didn't answer a single one. The guest room was never meant to be permanent. It had beige walls, a too-firm mattress, and a small desk I used once during a home office experiment that didn't stick. But after Eliza's departure was set in motion, it became my sanctuary. Temporary, sure, but clean, controlled, and quiet. It didn't have her throw pillows. No half-burned candles with cutesy names. No soft jazz floating from her Bluetooth speaker. Just peace. I changed the lock on day 1. Installed a keypad on day 2. I didn't ask for permission, didn't make a show of it. I just did it. Because I had learned something fundamental. When someone shows you disregard, the first thing you reclaim is your space. I wasn't going to sleep beside someone who laughed about me behind my back. I wasn't going to pretend things could be glued back together with sorries and the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. She noticed the changes quickly. Knocked on the door the next morning with 2 cups of coffee. Mine had always been black, hers overcomplicated. She tried her usual approach, soft voice, patient tone. "Jared, can we talk?" I didn't answer. The keypad beeped when I locked it behind me. That sound became a boundary, audible, firm, final. She moved through the house like a ghost after that. I'd hear her on the phone, whispering in the living room, or moving dishes around like the clatter might summon a conversation. It didn't. She started cooking more balsamic salmon, wild rice, things I'd once called fancy meals that don't fill you up. She set the table, lit candles. I walked right past them with a paper bag of takeout and ate in the garage next to my bench vise and toolbox. I'd taken all my important files, bank records, contracts, passwords, and locked them in the safe I bolted to the floor in the storage closet. She wouldn't snoop. Not that I knew of. But people twist under pressure. I wasn't about to risk my business because someone's feelings got bruised. She started leaving notes. Post-its on the fridge. Longer ones folded on the kitchen counter. I shredded them all without reading. Not out of spite, but discipline. I already knew what she'd say. Excuses. Deflections. Maybe a few carefully crafted jabs dressed up as apologies. I wasn't opening that door again. Literally or figuratively. The house became a stage for her moods. One morning she was cheerful, humming and doing laundry like it was just another Sunday. That night she was slamming cabinets. The next day she tried walking around in a silk robe she hadn't worn in months. It was always something. A tactic. A test. I didn't respond to any of it. People assume silence is passive. It's not. It's active. It's intentional. It's the loudest refusal in the world when someone expects you to speak, yell, argue, beg. And I refused to give her that satisfaction. A week in, she cornered me in the hallway. I was heading to the laundry room. She blocked the path, arms crossed, eyes wide and red-rimmed. "You're not even trying," she snapped. I stared at her. "You're right." That was the end of that. 2 days later, she told me she'd reached out to Dahlia, one of her old college friends. Said she'd be moving in temporarily. I gave a small nod. "Let me know the day. I'll help you pack." That seemed to deflate her more than anything else had. She stared at me for a long time like she was searching for some hint of the old us, some thread to pull and unravel all the consequences. But there wasn't one. That thread had been cut the moment she opened her mouth on that mezzanine. Still, I stayed out of the way. I wasn't cruel. I didn't shame her. I didn't start throwing her things into the yard or blasting my side of the story online. I wasn't interested in vengeance. I was interested in order, in closure. While she was out one afternoon, I boxed up the stuff she hadn't touched, her winter boots, some books, framed photos that used to hang in our hallway. I labeled them clearly, stacked them neatly in the garage, and sent her a text. "Your boxes are in the garage. Let me know when you want to move them." She replied an hour later. "Thanks." That night, I locked the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel proud. I just felt clear. Every relationship comes with rules, spoken or not. She broke the ones that mattered. So I made my own. Boundaries. Distance. No more reacting. Just responding. On my terms. I didn't owe her my anger. I owed myself peace. And for the first time since she laughed with her coworkers above my head, I was finally starting to find it. The house was unusually quiet that morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that fills every room with tension you don't need to touch to feel. She was leaving that day. Eliza. With her scarves and her curated playlists and her phone that never stopped buzzing. I didn't say anything as she moved from room to room, folding sweaters and wrapping glass perfume bottles in tissue like they were fragile truths she suddenly had to protect. I watched her from the garage for a while, standing just behind the cracked door. She moved slower than usual. No heels. No makeup. Just a messy bun, leggings, and that oversized sweatshirt she'd once stolen from me and claimed as hers. I almost laughed at the irony. How the sweatshirt would go, but the trust wouldn't. 10 days earlier, I told her 30 days. She took 10. Maybe she knew dragging it out wouldn't change anything. Or maybe she sensed something in me had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. The pleading had stopped. The crying. Even the passive-aggressive performance. She'd gone quiet. Like a radio turned down, but not off. I had already labeled the boxes. 6 in total. Each one taped neatly, stacked with military precision. I didn't toss her things, didn't break them or burn them or throw them out like trash. I gave them the same care I give my work, intentional, organized, done right the first time. That's how I treat things that used to matter. Her shoes, her books, jewelry trays, that ugly vase her aunt gifted us that I never liked, but never said anything about. I packed them all, labeled each box by room, bedroom, Eliza, bathroom, Eliza, closet, Eliza. Even the kitchen stuff she claimed, her expensive blender, the glass teapot she never used. She came into the garage just as I was finishing taping the last box. Her car was already parked out front, trunk open. Dahlia, her college friend, wasn't with her. Just Eliza and a strained silence hanging between us like wires stretched too tight. She stopped at the doorway and looked at the stacks. You really packed everything. I didn't look up from the tape gun. Made it easier. She stepped closer. You didn't have to do that. Figured you wouldn't want to, I said. And I didn't want your stuff lingering around. There was a pause. Efficient, she muttered. I stood and finally met her eyes. Like my business. She swallowed. Right. We didn't say much as we started moving the boxes. I took one end, she took the other. We moved like a well-trained team, like people who used to share a rhythm but now only shared a deadline. I didn't brush against her. She didn't try to make small talk. We were two strangers helping one of them disappear. When the trunk was nearly full, she leaned against the car and looked up at the house like she was seeing it for the first time. I used to love this porch, she said. Felt like a real home. It was, I replied. Still is. She flinched, just slightly. Guess I didn't treat it that way. I didn't reply. Some things don't need acknowledgement. She closed the trunk and turned toward me. Her voice softened. Jared, I didn't mean those things. That night, I was trying to fit in. Sound clever. I thought they liked me more when I was less sincere. You were always enough, I said. You just didn't believe that. So you became someone else. In that version, she didn't have space for me. She bit her lip, eyes flickering. You're not even angry. No, I said. I'm tired. And I'm done. She looked down, hands fiddling with the sleeves of the sweatshirt. What happens now? You move out, I said gently. And I keep living here. Same as I did before you came in and changed the paint colors. She nodded. I thought you'd at least yell. Tell me off. Something. I don't need noise, I said. I need peace. A long silence hung between us. The kind that used to end with a kiss. But this one just ended. She walked toward the driver's side, paused, and looked back one last time. You'll find someone you know. Someone who gets it. The real you. I gave a small shrug. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just build more. Fix more. Grow the business. She offered a half smile. You always were better at building things than talking about them. Which is why I built a home, and you talked your way out of it. She blinked once, then climbed in. The engine started. She looked straight ahead. Didn't wave. Didn't cry. Just drove off. And just before she reached the end of the street, I saw her arm raise, middle finger out the window, right at the security camera above the garage. Childish. I pulled out my phone, opened the security app, and tapped Disable Access. Then I walked back inside, shut the garage door, and changed the keypad code. Again, the echo of the closing door was louder than usual. But this time, it sounded final. It started 3 days after she left. At first, I thought the silence was permanent. She was gone, the boxes were gone, her perfume finally faded from the hallway, and the echo in the living room stopped sounding like her laugh. I just finished updating a project estimate when my phone buzzed with a message from Clay, an old high school buddy I still fish with sometimes. Bro, is everything okay? I stared at the text. Confused. No context. Just concern. Out of nowhere. Then another came in. This time from Nicole, one of Eliza's old brunch friends who used to pretend to like me and always posted her lattes online like they were art. Hey, saw Eliza's post, wow. Just checking in if you need to talk. I frowned. I hadn't seen Eliza's social media in weeks. After the night at the hotel, I muted her across the board. I didn't need curated memories, filtered sadness, or cryptic captions about growth through pain. But now my curiosity flickered. I logged into my alternate account, the one I used to test client website links. Not that I'd ever admit it to anyone. I searched her handle. There it was. A long post, 3 paragraphs deep, with a black and white photo of her looking over her shoulder. Dramatic. Poised. The caption? Sometimes the hardest prison to leave is the one no one sees. Emotional abuse isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet control, the little rules, the monitoring, the power imbalance disguised as love. I walked away with nothing but peace. And that's everything. My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. But something inside me cooled like a slow-moving frost. She'd gone public. She'd weaponized the story. I kept scrolling. Comment after comment from her coworkers, distant cousins, yoga friends I barely remembered. So brave. Proud of you, girl. You deserve better. She hadn't named me, of course. But she didn't have to. The innuendo was a neon sign. I was the controlling husband. The man who kicked her out with nothing. Never mind the 6 labeled boxes. The contribution agreement. The 30-day notice. The part where she called me obsessed while leaning against another man at a rooftop bar. Another post came later that day. A photo of a cup of tea, a journal, and the caption. Healing isn't linear. Some days are harder than others. But I know now, I was never crazy. I was silenced. I didn't respond. Not to the posts. Not to the texts. Not to the messages piling in from people who weren't there. I didn't reach for a rebuttal or call a mutual friend to clear my name. I cleaned the house. The next day, I threw away the sheets we used to share. The ones she insisted be Egyptian cotton or nothing. I dropped them in a black trash bag, tied it shut, and didn't look back. I donated the throw blankets, the decorative vases, the cheap frames from Target with photos we were never smiling in. I rearranged the kitchen, moved my coffee mugs to the cabinet I liked. Reclaimed the space, one drawer at a time. More messages came. I don't know what happened, man, but she's really going through it. Just tell me you're not the guy she's talking about. I ignored them all. People want drama. They want your side of the story so they can measure the pain, weigh it like fruit at the market, and decide which bruises are authentic. But I didn't give them that. Because the truth? Truth doesn't need to shout. I've seen lies build fast, like scaffolding thrown together with cheap joints. But truth is slow, solid, built to last. You just have to let it do the work. So I stayed silent. I stopped logging into that alternate account. Deleted the photos I still had of her on my phone. Took her emergency contact name off my work file. Called my bank, removed her as an approved name on the account we never even used together. And I slept better. I'd lie on the guest room bed, the one I was starting to call mine now, and stare at the ceiling fan spinning like time itself, rhythmic and uncaring. I'd wake up and not wonder where she was. I'd drink coffee without waiting for the sound of her footsteps. She could run her campaign. Let her followers clap and share and repost. Let her build her echo chamber out of half-truths and soft focus filters. Me? I had a business to run, a house to maintain, a life to rebuild. And the one thing I still had that she didn't? Credibility. People can say what they want about you. They can paint you as the villain. But if you stay still long enough, they show their hand, their inconsistencies, their timing, their patterns. And the same people who cheered for them start asking quiet questions. I didn't need to rush a defense. My story was waiting for me. In every board I cut, every wall I repaired, every damn cabinet I refinished until it gleamed. She had followers. I had peace. I was winning. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a name I didn't expect. Mira. That alone was strange enough. Mira never liked me. She barely tolerated me. Actually, Eliza's self-appointed work twin, queen of passive-aggressive compliments and eye rolls when I showed up in flannel at one of their corporate rooftop events. She was the type who spoke in LinkedIn slogans, all about synergy and elevated presence. If Eliza was the firecracker, Mira was the lighter held a little too close. So when her name popped up, I almost ignored it. But curiosity has a funny way of slipping past your resolve. I swiped it open. Just thought you should know, she's moved in with Jordan from work. The guy she was leaning on that night. It wasn't just a joke. I stared at the message. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. Not a flutter in my chest. Not a knot in my stomach. Just stillness. The kind you only feel after a storm, when everything's wet and quiet and finally calm. Jordan. Of course it was Jordan. Tall, loud, hair so perfect it looked fake. He always had some half-buttoned shirt and a drink in hand. At every event, he hovered around Eliza like a planet trying to crash into her sun. He called her Ellie when no one else did. Touch her arm when he made a joke. And I saw it. The way she laughed just a little too hard. How her eyes lingered on him just a little too long. I told myself it was work banter. Office culture. Something I didn't understand. But deep down, I'd always known. There were signs. There are always signs. You just lie to yourself because facing them means change. And most people aren't brave enough for that. I wasn't. Not then. I put my phone down and leaned against the counter. The kitchen was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the soft tick of the wall clock. 7:43 p.m. I still hadn't eaten dinner. There was leftover chicken in the fridge. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I walked into the living room, turned off the lamp Eliza always left on even when the sun was still up, and sat on the floor, back against the wall. Jordan. She was living with Jordan. So all that performative grief? The PR campaign? The healing journey, hashtags, and cropped black and white selfies? It was all set up. A deflection. She hadn't lost anything. She had options lined up like train stops, just waiting to hop to the next ride once the last one stopped. And I was supposed to be the fool left behind. But I didn't feel like a fool. I felt free. For the first time since that night at the hotel, I let my body fully relax. Not the tense posture I'd held on to since handing her the 30-day notice. Not the quiet coil of alertness I wore every time a notification popped up. I let my shoulders sink. My jaw unclenched. I didn't know how much tension I'd been carrying until it dropped away like a weight that never belonged to me in the first place. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. The truth had always been there. I just needed the final piece. And now I had it. A part of me wanted to reply to Mira. Not to thank her. She wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it because Eliza probably burned her, too. That's how people like Eliza operate. They drain every room they enter, then act shocked when the lights go out. But I didn't text back. I didn't need to. I stood up, went to the garage, and pulled out a bucket of paint. I bought it weeks ago, an off-white tone called washed cotton that I planned to use for the guest room, back when I still thought of it as temporary. But now, it was mine. I painted late into the night. Music low. Windows cracked. I moved slowly, methodically, like I was washing the walls of something invisible but heavy. I didn't think about her once. Not her laugh. Not her perfume. Not the way she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking. She had become someone else's story, and I was finally writing mine. By midnight, the room smelled like clean beginnings. I closed the window, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway for a moment, just taking it in. This was what peace looked like. It didn't come with a speech. No grand closure. No revenge or vindication. Just a text. Just a name. Jordan. And a realization. I didn't need to respond. Because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks away, steady and silent, while the world screams for attention. I started by removing the floral rug from the living room. Rolled it up tight, tied it off with a couple of bungee cords, and dropped it next to the trash bins behind the garage. It was one of those things Eliza had insisted on. It warms up the space, she said when it arrived, unasked, from some overpriced boutique in the city. I always hated it. The colors didn't match the hardwood. It never stayed flat. But for 2 years, it lay there like a silent compromise. Now it was gone. I moved through the house like a man reclaiming territory. The soft gray curtains she loved, swapped for solid canvas. The delicate little dishes she used for her jewelry, even though she never wore half of it, packed into a donation box. I scrubbed the baseboards, repainted the trim, replaced the knobs on the cabinets. These weren't just chores. They were therapy. With every change, I scraped off a layer of her. The house stopped feeling like a shrine to who we used to be and started feeling like mine again. Neighbors asked questions. You could see it in their eyes when they waved from their driveways. The hesitance. The curiosity. Everyone had seen her posts. Everyone had read the captions and nodded at their screens, thinking they knew the full story. They didn't ask me for my side. Not out loud. But every now and then, someone lingered a little longer. A beat too long at the mailbox. A casual, everything good, from across the fence. I'd nod. Everything's great. They never pushed further. They didn't want the real answer. Just reassurance that I wasn't about to explode. I didn't need to. Because silence is a skill. Not everyone has it. Some people fill every crack in their day with noise, as if quiet might expose the truth. But I learned something over the last month. Walking away without a fight doesn't mean weakness. It means control. It means refusing to let someone dictate the terms of your dignity. I could have confronted Eliza at the party. Could have stormed up the stairs, made a scene, called out every word. But that would have been exactly what she wanted, an emotional headline, a way to rewrite the narrative. Instead, I chose silence. Walked away. Wrote my own story in the margins. That silence? It rattled her more than shouting ever would. She called. 62 times. I answered none. I saw the comments under her posts. Some were subtle digs, some open accusations. He was always watching. Never let me breathe. Made me feel small. I didn't respond. Didn't explain. Because I knew the people who mattered, the ones who'd actually been in our lives, could see the gaps. They knew who did the cooking, who drove her to early meetings, who stayed late when her car broke down, who decorated the porch for Christmas even when I was working 70-hour weeks. They knew me. And more importantly, I knew me. That was enough. I sat in the guest room, now fully painted, now fully mine, and flipped through a notebook I'd left untouched since she moved in. It was where I sketched furniture designs. Things I never built because time got away from me. I'd put everything into us. Into maintaining, smoothing over, showing up. But now that she was gone, now that the noise had finally died down, I had space to create again. Real space. I picked up a pencil and started sketching. A desk, minimalist but strong. Clean lines. Walnut. No unnecessary curves. Something grounded. Just like I wanted to be. Later that week, a friend asked me if I ever regretted not fighting harder. If there was a version of this story where I won her back. I thought about it for a second. Then I shook my head. No one wins when you have to beg to be respected. He nodded, quiet. Eliza never got the explosion she wanted. No slam doors. No screaming in the driveway. No emotional showdown for her audience to feed on. All she got was distance. Clean, surgical, undeniable. Some people think the absence of noise means the absence of pain. They're wrong. It just means you've processed it already, carried it around long enough to know it's not worth bleeding for anymore. Silence is not surrender. It's strategy. She was right about one thing that night at the bar. There was obsession involved. But it wasn't mine. She was obsessed with attention, with validation, with being seen, adored, applauded. I was just obsessed with peace. And that's exactly what I was finally learning to live in. 3 months. That's how long it had been since Eliza pulled out of the driveway, middle finger raised, trunk full of boxes and dignity left behind. In those 3 months, I hadn't once checked her page. I hadn't said her name aloud unless someone else did first. I hadn't looked back, because there was nothing back there worth missing. My house was quieter now, and not just in volume. It breathed differently. The walls didn't carry tension anymore. The hallways didn't echo with unspoken things. It felt lighter, like I'd cracked a window and let something heavy float out. The space was mine again, down to the scuffed wood near the laundry room and the coffee mug ring etched into the corner of the kitchen island. All the things that annoyed her, the rugged edges, the unfinished trim, the slow-draining tub, I kept them. On purpose. They reminded me that things could be imperfect and still worth keeping. Business had taken off, too. Word of mouth travels fast when you're consistent, and I'd picked up 3 new renovation contracts in the span of 2 months. Solid clients. People who didn't flinch at quotes and didn't try to exposure me for a discount. I'd even hired a part-time assistant, Lana. Mid-30s, sharp, direct, and didn't treat me like I was invisible in meetings. She had a background in design and a better eye for finished pairings than I ever did. We made a good team. Professional. Easy. She never asked about my personal life. Didn't pry. That alone made her a breath of fresh air. One morning, after wrapping up a client walkthrough, I stood in the garage with a cup of coffee and realized I hadn't thought about Eliza all week. Not once. Not her voice, not her laugh, not the way she'd tilt her head when she was gearing up to lie. Nothing. And it wasn't because I was avoiding the thought. It was because she was, finally, irrelevant. That's when it hit me. The true end doesn't come with a slammed door or a dramatic goodbye. It comes quietly, like forgetting the password to a Wi-Fi network you haven't used in years. One day, it just stops being useful. Of course, she tried again. Last week, actually. An email. Short. Polished. Her tone like she was writing a press release. Hi, Jared. Just wanted to reach out and say I hope you're doing well. I know things ended abruptly, and I've been reflecting on my role in that. I'd love to talk sometime. No pressure, just closure. Closure. That word people throw around like it's a ticket to re-enter someone's life. I stared at the message for a few minutes. Not out of emotion, just evaluation. I read it the same way I read a client's change order, carefully, searching for what wasn't said. I didn't respond. Because not everything deserves one. Sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. Not out of malice. Not out of pride. But because some chapters don't need epilogues. They just need a clean page. I archived the email and went back to work. Lana was prepping materials in the front yard, and we had drywall to measure. There was no time for ghosts. Later that night, I sat on the back porch, the same place Eliza used to hate because the mosquitoes were too aggressive. I lit one citronella candle, old habit, and watched the sky shift from orange to blue to that quiet shade of indigo that only shows up when you're paying attention. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd find peace in this, I wouldn't have believed them. But peace isn't found. It's built. Like anything worth having. One board at a time. One honest conversation with yourself at a time. One moment where you choose to move forward instead of circling back to what hurt you. People had asked, some still did, why I didn't clear my name publicly. Why I let her control the narrative. But the truth is, I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed to win my life back. Let her have her followers. Let her curate the heartbreak. Let her spin the version where she walked away bruised but brave. That was never my business. I wasn't the villain. And I didn't need the world to clap for me to know that. If there's one thing I've learned, one thing I'd tell any man who's ever been painted with the wrong brush, it's this. When someone tells the world you're obsessed with them, don't argue. Don't beg to explain. Just disappear from their story. And write your own. One where silence is strength. One where you don't chase people who enjoy losing you. One where the only version of you that matters is the one looking back in the mirror, clean-shaven, steady-eyed, and finally free.